Hello and welcome to our panel discussion, Women in STEM Careers, a webinar and discussion shared by WR Berkeley's Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. I am Emily Urban, president of Berkley Life Sciences, and I'm delighted to be with three of my friends, former teammates and colleagues from Columbia, all of whom are currently working in STEM careers. For those of you who are not familiar with Berkley Life Sciences, we insure life science companies from preclinical up through commercialization for their products, clinical trials, property, auto, comp, and general liability. In honor of Women's History Month, we are so pleased to have with us Dr. Jennifer McCarthy, Dr. Michelle Rivera, and Dr. Molly Carr. Dr. Molly Carr was a Barnard College undergrad and attended Columbia University for physicians and surgeons for her medical degree, and the University of Washington for her fellowship and residency. Her work experience includes large pharma at GSK. She was the director of clinical development. She worked at Lilly on external innovation and business development on the diabetes programs. She's also currently a University of Penn Medicine associate professor, and she is Eli Lilly's clinical head of diabetes development. Welcome, Molly. Thank you. We also have Jennifer Wright. Jennifer was a Columbia College undergrad, major in biology. She attended State University of New York for medical school and was an intern resident at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Cornell Medical Center. Jenna includes a diverse background in combined care models at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Case Western, and Goldman Sachs, where she looked at combining counseling and healthcare services. She's currently the Chief Medical Officer at Yale Health. And lastly, we have Michelle Rivera. Michelle, also a Columbia grad, undergrad, and then Harvard Medical School. Michelle was currently a practicing radiologist, where she was also the founder of American Women Unite for Breast Cancer Screening. She was an associate professor at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and she's currently the CEO and founder of Phenom Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, my friends here with Women in STEM Careers. So each of you has had an interesting path to your current career in STEM. Could you share with us how you decided to work in science? And if I can start and direct this question first to Jenna, because Jenna, if I recall, you had internships on Wall Street. But now you're a doctor. Talk to us about how that happened.
Yeah, so I had a non-traditional, I didn't go directly from undergraduate to med school. I worked for 4 years. And I think after a year or so in the workforce, I really decided that I wanted something that was more of a calling, more of a commitment, not just a job, but an actual profession. And I think one of the things that really drew me to medicine was it's a meritocracy. So if you are smart, if you are working hard, if you are committed and dedicated, you're going to be able to practice your profession. And so that really appealed to me. And also the constant learning. So I think the other panelists can say things we learned in medical school are no longer true, or my son is actually a medical student, and there are things he tells me about that I know we did not learn about. So the constant learning is really a very rewarding part. I'm not sure I knew that at the beginning, but I think I had an inkling.
Very nice. That's wonderful. Michelle or Molly, would you like to share anything on that question?
I have to agree with Jennifer. In fact, she mirrors many of the reasons that I went into medicine. I knew from about the time that I was 11 that I wanted to be a doctor. I don't necessarily recommend that for everyone. I do think people should go to college and look around. I was just I don't know if it was stubborn or whatever, but I kind of knew very early on. But there are certainly folks who, come to medicine later in their lives and have wonderful careers and have a wealth of experience before they get to medical school, and that's wonderful as well. I just kind of had a singular focus because exactly as Jennifer said, I love the meritocracy of it, where if you study hard enough, if you know what you're doing, human physiology is the same around the world. So you can work anywhere, you can take care of any patient. And I really love that. And once I got to medical school, I initially had wanted to be a surgeon, but then I rotated through radiology, and I just realized that a lot of the new technologies actually come through radiology, in all of medicine actually come through radiology, and then are kind of, adapted outside of radiology, surgical techniques, all of that stuff. So I always wanted to learn something new and I have to say, radiology and breast imaging have not disappointed. I literally have seen the advent of digital mammography, tomosynthesis, MRI. I mean, we, as a breast imager, we can target 2-millimeter lesions in the breast with exceedingly good accuracy. And it's pretty miraculous. So, and it's been wonderful to see breast imaging, become such a vital part of women's health. And, we've really, really improved mortality. I'm going on and on. I could talk about this for like 2 weeks, so I will cut it short. But anyway, I agree with Jenna, always learning something new, the meritocracy, that's pretty much it.
Wonderful. And Molly, anything that you'd like to share?
Well, I was also very young when I decided to go into medicine. I think it was for me just a draw to the science. I really loved it. So it was very easy. I didn't actually realize how nice it would be to marry up the science with the relationships with people. So while I was, I've been in academics and done research, and now I'm working in drug development, I didn't want to give up patient care. It's a real honor to be someone's doctor. They're big shoes to fill, and I love it. So it's a really, really great marriage of science and people. And one other thing, I work in drug development with a lot of discovery scientists with PhDs, and they're just great people. So I feel as if I've talked to my son, and he's a chemistry major in college. I said, they're smart, they're nice, they're like really the nicest people you've ever worked with. So it's a great job that changes all the time, and there's new science going forward. So it's really satisfying every day for a lot of reasons.
Thank you. And Molly, did you have somebody that influenced you in going into science?
I look back at, I think in 6th grade science teacher. I always think I want to go back and thank her, because it was one of those things where it was really a spark. And they say that in a lot of fields. I'm an endocrinologist. Not many people go into the field. And I think a lot of us even talk about the fact that they need to be exposed. You need some exposure. You need to sort of understand what it's about. You also need to see that it's not, remove the awe and realize that we're just people. So I think that once you have that exposure, it's really, it opens doors for kids.
Great. And Michelle or Jenna, any specific person that got you to look at going into the science?
So, yeah, I think a variety of people over the years. I always think back to my childhood pediatrician. My mother specifically took us to a female pediatrician. And, back then that was even, less common. And I just remember thinking, wow, what a cool job she has. And her office was attached to her house.
Yeah.
So no commute. Yeah, that's a memory I have.
For me, I think the spark was probably around 5th or 6th grade. We had to do some reports in school about like current events, and Dr. Jarvik had just implanted the first artificial heart. And that just kind of like blew, that just like exploded my brain. And I went to medical school with the intent of being a transplant surgeon, because I just love that. I think part of, the adrenaline rush of doing all that, certainly a far cry from what I wound up doing. But I do think that was a big spark for me. And, I love that, we live in a world of tremendous innovations, and any Google search on any day can yield, fantastic scientific innovation. So I think that young generation, whereas for us, it was maybe that one headline We were lucky we caught it, but I think nowadays there's lots of inspiration.
That is so true. And on the innovation front, there is so much that's changing, right? And do Michelle, you started a company, right? You started Phenom Pharmaceuticals and innovation. How did that play in innovation and how you went into that organization? Was there a specific thought process behind it? Like, I'm going to start a company, or was it more, it was something that happened along the way?
It was an idea. I mean, we were in the thick of COVID, and I thought I was lucky. I think this kind of maybe touches on something else one of the other questions that we're probably going to discuss. But while I was in medical school, there was a wonderful physician, Mike Rosenblatt, who just he just made it his job to make opportunities for us. And one of the things at the time, he was a vice president at Merck. And he made a summer program for anybody from our med school who wanted to go. And we were thrust into these super high-end labs doing amazing research. And, we learned Eliza, I mean, in a summer, we really got, a tremendous exposure, and I loved it. And it always stayed with me. And a lot of the stuff, I feel like it was like a crash course, in bench research, in, planning and all of that stuff. As much as they could teach us, they really did a fantastic job. So that stayed with me. And during COVID, I thought, I think I have an idea for a product, and I'm going to see if I can make this work. And so I was lucky to find some virtual teams who were, excited to work on the project, and we have great data. So we just signed up with a life sciences company to continue developing it. So it kind of happened in response to the pandemic, but I feel like it would have happened eventually because I really love it. It's been a fantastic experience.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. And from the innovation front, is there something that also is driving a charge or something with you, Jenna? Is there anything that way?
Well, Michelle's in a different space. I'm in primary care delivery, but we do see these innovations. Just the mRNA vaccine for COVID. Obviously, that's world-changing, life-changing. It's going to be the way we deliver other vaccines going forward. So it's very exciting to be in medicine while these things are happening. There's been a lot of politicization of the COVID pandemic, but we think that we can see the collaboration that started with the Chinese scientists posting the viral genome as soon as they were able to. So the innovation is all around us, even if we're practicing primary care medicine. So it's a very exciting part of being in STEM.
Awesome. And I think the whole mRNA technology, right? This isn't new technology today. The technology has been around for a good 10 years plus.
Decade,
correct?
yeah.
And it started back on the Zika virus, and they were trying to do some other things. So it truly is an exciting time on how they were able to pivot, right? And able to pivot and say, okay, what about this?
Right.
So I absolutely agree. Some exciting information there. And from an innovation standpoint, Molly, anything that you want to share? It's a little harder maybe in your space to share with us, but anything you want to talk? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think we're always looking for unmet need. I can talk about something leading a program for a once-weekly insulin, for instance. So this is not confidential. So this recently started, but I think you're really thinking about even in primary care, why aren't patients with diabetes able to get their glucoses under adequate control? So it's a high percentage of patients out there, and it's being an endocrinologist and taking care of diabetes for a long time. We know that it's darn hard work. So I think it's one of the things when you're in science, you're also marrying up the practical reality of life. It's just hard to take care of certain diseases. So I think that's one of the things that we're looking for working in a big pharmaceutical company like I do is where is there a need for the patient?
Well, and just from a personal experience, Molly, I kudos to Lily and to your team for doing that, because my dad, who passed away last year, he was a type 2 diabetic, and the idea of trying to find that balance on your medication. And so much is behavioral, right? As much as the medicine itself. So I know that we so look forward to finding better ways to help those manage it. So kudos to Lily, and please keep that going, because there's an awful lot that they're suffering from that illness and how to manage it. So that's pretty cool. What about mentors? Talk to us about mentors. Have you had some mentors in the science realm? You mentioned a doctor who is at Merck, Michelle, but are there others, female mentors, male mentors? Talk to us a bit about how that's helped you in your career.
Yeah, I can kick that off. I would say that it's vitally important to have mentors and to have a variety of mentors. So sometimes I've seen people have their one mentor and they're, sort of going along in their careers together, the senior and the junior person. But it's really important to, particularly for young people who are starting out, different types of mentors, different areas of where your career might go. I had a mentor when I was at New York Presbyterian who kept encouraging me to go into leadership roles. And like everyone has said, the patient experience, being a doctor, it's a privilege and honor, and it's really very hard to give up and all your clinical work and do just leadership administration. And people resist it. And this woman, she's now I don't know exactly her title, but she pretty much runs New York Presbyterian Hospital, Laura Faris, was really vital in pushing me to take things that I thought really weren't for me. And I found that I really liked leadership in healthcare delivery and that it fit some of my soft skills. So that was really important. But then it's also really important to align yourself when you build teams and when you're working with others, people who don't have the same skill set as you. So if you're a drive for results, high energy person, like I think you are, Emily, where you really need some very detailed people in your life, people who are going to say, whoa, stop running with that idea. Let's look a little more deeply into the data and the details. So it's really good to surround yourself and to know your own strengths and seek out people who complement your strengths.
And keep us in line, right? Keep us in line and balance us. Molly and Michelle? Anything else to add from a mentor standpoint?
I think I have benefited greatly from leaders, and I really like to coach and mentor a lot, and I take the learnings that I've received as I've grown to pass those on. So words of wisdom from one mentor that I then pass on to others. I think it's really like really being careful to understand, build insight about how you land on people. Understanding how important it is to the more senior you become, the less you should be speaking in meetings, right? How do you build the tone on a team to bring out the best in people? So I think I read a lot in the leadership area, but then these are discussions, so I think it's very interesting when you're in science. These roles we have now, I think they're not intuitive for scientists. So you really have to seek out how do I do this, and so learning how to get the best out of people, step back and give them breathing room so you're not micromanaging. These are things we've all had to learn over the course of our careers.
I absolutely agree. And I do think that for some of us that maybe are drivers, which I can see some women on this panel that are also in that group, that it is hard sometimes to step back, right? And to let go and let the team do that work and give them that opportunity, right? And let them kind of move forward with it. So absolutely agree with those comments, Molly. And Michelle, anything to add there?
Yeah, and I feel like I continue to kind of add mentors onto my life as I go. I mean, certainly I've had mentors all along, and now I feel it's really important for colleagues to support each other and, have, personal interaction. So we, in radiology, it's become pretty easy to, share images. Of course, they're confidentially, but if you see an interesting case, it's easy to share to colleagues. And, I I really enjoy that collaborative part of medicine. So I feel like, even my peers become my mentors in a sense, and we kind of all do that for each other. And I feel like with the even texting, we can send a pic, again, anonymized. We can send a picture to a surgeon, a colleague across town. Hey, look at this, whatever, or this patient's coming to see you right now. It's really it's a very collaborative environment in STEM, I feel like, and both in clinical medicine and especially in the kind of hardcore science world that I've been exposed to with being on pharmaceuticals. I couldn't have done anything that I did without all my virtual teams, and it's extremely collaborative, and we talk about everything, which is kind of interesting. Sometimes in medicine, as a doctor, you're just kind of rushing, you're not rushing, but you're moving quickly through so much information. Like you kind of highlight things as you go along, but when we're doing research, we're talking about like every little nitpicky detail, which is fantastic, and I think that draws teams together. So, and I've had certainly female colleagues. In fact, my lead formulation scientist is a PhD. She's a woman, and she's fantastic. She's absolutely fantastic. So I've really enjoyed that part too, and I consider her a mentor now too.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And have you seen the growth of women in STEM as you've moved through your career? So have you seen the numbers changed significantly? Is there something that you can share of something you have contributed to or been part of in seeing those numbers change of more women in STEM?
When I started med school in 1990, most medical schools at that time were already 50-50, men and women.
Okay.
But when I left academics and moved to the corporate world, you definitely see differences, but it seems to be company dependent, as I've been at a few different companies, and I've benefited greatly from some sort of coaching, some development programs for women that I think have been great. I don't think men and women are that different, so personally, but I do think that we learn different things and we have different experiences, and that changes us. So one of the interesting things for women is to become more aware of how your environment has impacted you and allow you to kind of flourish. So one of the interesting articles I've read, I mean, maybe I'm taking this too deep, Emily, but there's a great article in the Harvard Business Review about sort of subconscious bias. And one of the interesting things I took away from it is that sometimes for women, and I think for men too, the biggest blockade or barrier for seeing themselves as leaders is the becoming a leader is that they don't themselves see themselves as a leader. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're talking here about our experiences. We've been lucky, we've been successful, but I think that's one of the things that mentors do, and these coaching experiences have had. And then when you get there, and now my job is to pass it on, pass it forward.
Absolutely, and passing it on is a big part of it. And I do think that there's some of that with your environment and the biases and the lenses that you have grown up with, right? And it's not just you; it's men also. It's everyone has these different biases in their lenses on how they view things. And it was funny because this past week I was having lunch, and kind of a mentoring lunch with a younger woman, and stating that don't apologize. And I could see a big part. It's like apologizing. Oh, well, little things that you shouldn't apologize for. And I could see the mirror in myself that I used to do that so much, growing up in the corporate world. And having that ability to say, step back and look at someone and say, it's like, no, I'm here at this table, and I do have a voice, and being able to say something. So I do think the lens that you're brought up, it's not necessarily male, female, it's just that individual, no matter where they are, male, female, whatever, but it's that upbringing and that lens has a different impact for all of us, and how we approach situations. But I do think that what you're saying on the leadership piece, it is a big part for us to make sure that we're helping those coming forward, because coming up and what we can do. So absolutely agree with that. Jennifer or Michelle? Anything else on?
Well, I would just say primary care right now is a female dominated group, workforce. So, here where I work at Yale Health, we are, way more than 50% of our providers are women. And so then you sort of question, well, why are so many women in primary care and didn't do a specialty? I know for me, I had a baby during internship, and my spouse was not going to put up with another couple of years. And do I regret it? Sometimes, yes, I do. But you really can't go backwards. So we really have, in fact, sometimes when we're recruiting, we say, oh, do we have any candidates who are not women? And, or that will come up in the recruiting meetings. And then some of the, one of our docs said, well, really they had the first 300 years, the men. So we're going to take it now. So, there also was a study, I think it was in JAMA, but it was women primary care docs who followed their patients in the hospital had better outcomes. So that got a lot of press, and it was, sort of a hot topic. But it's one study, but it's very interesting to think about how our upbringing, like you said, Emily, our lens, our biases that we experience and that we've been subject to affect how we show up professionally. So I will say, in the corporate part, the leadership administrative part of my job, I refuse to put exclamation points on any emails unless I'm truly excited about something. And I have gotten feedback that my emails are curt. So maybe an exclamation point would help with that. But I think the folks who know me well know it's not curt, it's just busy. But yeah, it is an important thing to consider and to pass on to the younger generation about what they might encounter and how to be aware of their own biases.
Yeah, I mean, and in the breast imaging world, at least in my perspective, that my anecdotal experience, I don't know the national numbers, but in my own experience in both academics and private practice, there were still more men than women in radiology, and a lot of men in breast imaging as well. And the interesting part of that is, I can tell you that at least once a day, I would have a woman say to me, "Oh," when I walked into the room, "Thank God you're a woman." I mean, it's breast imaging. I'm examining women's breasts. We're talking about things, we're biopsying, we're doing all this stuff, and women do prefer. Most women, I think, prefer to have female doctors. That may not be always, but at least in my experience in breast imaging. So I do think it's really important, that we continue to have at least 50% of women in healthcare, in breast, in specific women-oriented careers and subspecialties as well, because patients want that. And ultimately, we want to make our patients comfortable. We want them to identify with the person who's giving them a sometimes pretty, scary recommendation. And it's, that's part of the reason I made a video on 3 female physicians who had their cancers diagnosed by screening mammography, to show patients that they're women and they're doing that too. No one really wants to go have a mammogram, but they do it too, because they understand the science, and the science really supports screening beginning at age 40. Again, I can go on a 2-week diatribe on that, so I'll keep it short. But, and they, these women were in primary care, and they were also breast imagers. And they're the ones also making recommendations to have surgery, to have mastectomies to patients. And the thing is, they took these recommendations for themselves as well. So I do think it's very important to have, significant numbers of women represented in medicine and science in general, to address women's issues and to interact with patients.
I couldn't agree more, because I do think having more, but I think it goes with everything. When you can have that diversity and diversity of thought, because someone may come at it with a different angle. And it's not necessarily, there's the male opinion, the female, but it's the diversity of thought. It's the diversity of bringing in all these different ideas, and they look at it in a new way. And Michelle, you have been very active, right, on your founding of your American Women Unite for Breast Cancer Screening, and you've been a big advocate in associating that. Is that one of the parts that you would like to share with that you've been pretty proud of, or an accomplishment that any of you would like to share in your history?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Emily. You know, there, I wholeheartedly believe that women should be screened every year for breast cancer beginning at age 40. And there was a big push, and there still is, to delay that to age 50 every 2 years. There is probably some of the best science in medicine supporting beginning at 40. In my personal opinion, actually, I think it should even be sooner because, you know, on a daily basis, we see young women earlier, you know, younger than 40, diagnosed with breast cancer. And unfortunately, those breast cancers tend to be quite aggressive. So, you know, 40 is the number that works, that we have data to support. Certainly 50, we would miss, you know, decades worth of women's health years if we missed all those cancers. So anyway, it is a very important topic. I think, you know, we need to continue to spread the message that 40 is the year that you can minimize mortality from breast cancer if you begin at age 40 and do it yearly. We now have tomosynthesis, which is 3D, which helps us find, you know, smaller cancers that we could see before. So, you know, the science is moving forward. And I just hope that we can continue with the momentum and not move backwards. So we continue with the momentum, 40 yearly screening, and just, you know, have the science get better and better so that we can catch more and more cancers. So yeah, I mean, it's a very important issue to me. I've actually joined Congress folks from North Carolina on Capitol Hill, and we've, you know, presented the data and have been part of the PALS Act, Protective Access to Life-Saving Screening, which puts a moratorium on that screening option beginning at age 50 that the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force has recommended. So that recommendation is still out there, but the PALS Act pushes that, you know, into the future so that women can continue to have their their screening mammograms covered by insurance without a copay. And that's just vitally important. That is vital. So it has been, you know, kind of a fight to do that. I wish I didn't have to do that. It just makes sense. Like, it shouldn't be an issue. But so far, so good. And women still have their screening mammograms covered. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that that actually becomes, you know, part of our, you know, healthcare in our country going forward, and that it doesn't have to be renewed every year.
Well, thank you for your advocacy on making sure that we can get that. I think for all of us, I think there's a definite reason for there. And yeah, Molly or Jenna, do you have something that you're pretty proud to share that you've been pretty proud to, that's something you've accomplished in your science career?
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky. I changed careers at age 40, leaving academics, you know, where I was a researcher, and moving into the corporate world. And it was a big change, and I've really loved it. But I kept seeing patients. So I'm very proud of the 15 years that I've been volunteering in clinic. Mm-hmm. I would say, you know, if this is a theme, you know, I think it's to this panel, it's just how much fun the science is, how much learning, how much everyday learning, how many opportunities to grow there are. But, you know, and then being a physician is an honor, you know, so you've got 3 positions here. But for me, I have been proud of that clinical care that I've given since I left academics and stayed in clinic now, which was voluntary. And so it's that I'm proud of.
Very nice. Well, thank you for doing that. Jen?
Yeah, I would echo what Molly said. You know, it's vitally important to me to keep seeing patients. And it's something as you become busier and you have more responsibility, that it might be easy to give up, but it just grounds you back to, why are you working on the healthcare delivery? Why are you, I sometimes say to my colleagues, it's almost like yoga for me. So when I go down and do a clinic session, you're so in the moment, you're so there with the patient trying to solve the problem that all the other things sort of fade away, and you're putting your training to work. I would say the thing I'm most proud of, and we're just coming out of, is our response to the COVID pandemic. So, healthcare workers across the country, everyone knows from the media that the stressors in the outpatient setting, our job was to identify who our at-risk patients were, make sure our clinicians had the most up-to-date information on the changing recommendations, the changing guidelines. We went from no testing to now a variety of testing types. The vaccine, of course, we all thought it was going to be, complete the series and we're done. And then no, we have to pivot again and say there need to be boosters. Now there are some amazing treatments, some monoclonal antibodies, antiviral medications that are keeping people out of the hospital and keeping people from dying. And so how to write the workflows, how to educate our clinical staff to make sure that those procedures are being followed and prevent complications from COVID. So I'm really proud of, just that I feel like I trained my whole career to sort of be in this healthcare delivery during a pandemic. So right now it seems like a really big accomplishment. Hopefully we'll keep moving in a positive direction.
Well, it is phenomenal, like everything that's been done and everything that you have done, Jenna, because when you were a Presbyterian, weren't you also on a response team specifically for handling some of this with Michelle?
Yeah, so when
Not this Michelle Kaiser, right?
we all thought that Ebola was going to be a big problem, and we had all these protocols around Ebola. Ebola wasn't respiratory, so it was sort of prepping for that. And then H1N1 was also built our toolkit, and so how to keep how to do mass vaccinations of populations. So it really has been an interesting journey.
An interesting journey, and I'm sure that everyone at Yale, and then also the students and everyone is probably pretty happy that you guys have been on top of it and been able to manage it. So everyone, I'm sure, is thanking you there also. And we appreciate all that you've done to help us, to help society. And I also want to sincerely thank you for the time that you spent with us this afternoon and your stories to touch our hearts, to give us hope in some areas, to continue the fight on different places, and whether it's on Capitol Hill or in the lab or in the company or in the school, to help make the world a better place, and a little bit of insight providing to maybe some of those sixth graders that are thinking themselves, hey, maybe I do want to be a scientist, and maybe someone will be sharing this with their son or daughter, and that sounds really cool. And it's not just when you think of going into science and it's just a physician, it's like there's so much more that you've been able to share of what you can bring to the table. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
Great to see you, Emily.